Hello, viewers. Welcome to the latest edition. We bring you a very good conversation with another poet. Her name is KJ Hannah Greenberg. She has written more than 40 books and she has been an editor for several literary journals around the world. We'll talk to her straightway and know from her the secrets of her poems. How does she write such a good poetry, and what is it that makes her such a good writer? So, Hannah, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So without any delay, I would jump into the discussion. I would like to know from you your journey as an author. You've been in the academics and then you transitioned from academics to your writing career. Would you please elaborate a bit about your journey?
With pleasure. Thank you. Well, I like words. Words are fun to play with. Some children like stuffed animals or real animals, dogs, cats. Some children like flowers. I like animals. I like flowers. I also like art, but I really like words. And I also like people. So I decided I wanted to grow up and be a teacher. That means I work with people of words. Meanwhile, by the time I was 8, I was already writing. I was my first poem I wrote when I was 8, and my first salaried newspaper column when I was 15. My publications allowed me to get into college early and then later into a rigorous graduate program early. I entered graduate school when I was 20. I'm in my 60s now. I'm a grandma. I'm grateful for that. So there's a lot of time from the beginning of my playing with words until this present day. But I always found words fun. If you look at the books that I've been fortunate to have published, they span genres. There are novels, there are short story collections, there are poetry collections, both chapbooks and full-length poetry books, and there are many, many essay collections. When I grew up, I became a rhetoric professor, so essays are like my breath for me. But I find words beautiful. I'm grateful for the ability to assemble them and make new pictures out of them. And for decades I taught at university and taught other people how to look at words, both to critique them and to fashion them into pieces. I also taught them how to think. Our freedom ends when we stop thinking.
As your writing goes, I have seen that most of your writing is deeply personal and introspective at times. How do you balance the vulnerability of, sort of sharing your personal experiences with an audience while also maintaining a level of, personal space or privacy for yourself?
Well, like every human being on this globe, I'm unique in the sense that the combination of experiences that I've undergone are particular to me. However, I'm one of many people that constitute humanity, and my experiences combined are its own special picture, but each experience is not special. Because I have words and because I have an awareness of how words impact people, I see that I have a responsibility. When I was a professor, my research area was the ethics of communication, the morality of how we talk, not so much to prescribe a religion or a philosophy, but to teach people to ask questions about the outcomes, the end results of what they do. So if I take a personal experience, it would be foolhardy for me to think that experience only belongs to me. I've written a lot about my children and more recently about my grandchildren, but I'm hardly the only person to have children or grandchildren. None of us would be here if we didn't have parents and grandparents. And even when I write about something less experienced, like academic goings on, I'm still hardly unique in having been a professor. So it's not so much that what I experience is special. What's
Mhm.
special and what creates a moral accountability is that I have the words to frame the events in my life, which are common to everyone. I'm not so special that way. And that I'm aware of that responsibility and try to use it.
Finding universality in some of the personal experiences is something that can underline your works. Am I correct?
I think so. I think so. It's I have training in herbal medicine, have natural medicine responses to illness and such. And it's no good for me if I know that the herb, in English thyme,
Mhm.
is helpful for respiratory infections. It is useful, however, if I know that this herb can help my children or my grandchildren or my friends. I don't practice professionally. I don't, not doing that. But any knowledge or awareness, and those are not the same thing, that we have as people, it's incumbent upon us to share it. We journey only for a short time on this earth, in this life, and what we do is either good or not, or some gradation in between. So I think it's really important to bring light, to bring qualities that enhance people when we create. I struggle sometimes with fiction because I need to um, check whether my motive for writing something is
Mhm.
purely entertainment, in which case I need to be honest with myself, or has some moral interwoven in the stories themselves. Often, socially disturbing events can be addressed through fiction because the politicos don't get upset about novels and short stories the same way they do about op-eds in newspapers or in chats online. So even non-real fiction work
Mhm.
can be used for elevating people.
Right, right. And I think that's where a writer plays a key role when he's able to sort of elevate the overall experience through his mode of communication, be it any genre, whether a poetry or essay or maybe a fiction. So I think very well said. Yeah. So recently you have published your new collection of poems, Communicated Childbirth Options, I believe. So many people, sort of find poetry to be a form of therapy or catharsis, for that matter. So has poetry helped you process your emotions or experiences in any way? I know you've already partly answered this question, but to be specific on this thing, do you feel so?
I think visual art, which,
Mm,
thank you God, I've had a lot published as covers of magazines, internal art and such, helps me process because it's less right brain for me than writing. I
mm,
have the editing, the censoring, the sifting of words so ingrained in me that writing can be a joy, but more so it's a service, I guess.
mm,
I there the audiences for popular fare for writing that sometimes referred to as beach reads or disposable writing is greater. And if somebody wants to write for profit, if that's their prime objective, that's a very different kind of writing than writing that has a sophistication that's nuanced.
mm,
Nuanced writing, just to digress for a second, is very useful. I used to teach my public speaking classes this different form of verbosity or orality, but I used to teach that if we can address one idea in like 5 ways, but they're hidden, the layers are hidden, then we're going to reach more audience.
mm,
However, we're in our world today, we're in a very fast world. Not only is food fast, but information dispersal is also very fast. and people don't have the patience. They'll scroll because most people get their information and their entertainment electronically now through convergent media. They'll scroll past entire pages or paragraphs if what they're reading, let alone what they're seeing, because even literature, even printed ideas are not so popular, they'll scroll past. So the first thing, like when I teach a writing course, a couple of years ago, I taught how to write a book course. And I said, the first thing a writer has to decide is why they're writing. Are they writing for fame? Are they writing for fortune? It's not for me to judge people. Are they writing because they have an idea that's useful for humankind? Are they writing because they have, this goes to your question directly, an emotional itch that they want to scratch, and maybe they can figure out a response to the affect that they're experiencing by writing about it? None of those reasons are right or wrong. About almost 18 years ago, I had the good fortune to make Aliyah, to move up to Israel from North America. And in the recent years, I'm starting to think that one thing I can do with writing is to present the beauty of Israel. A lot of the news presents things that are ugly and exaggerated. So that can be an output of writing. Therefore, now in some of my fiction and some of my poetry and some of my essays, I might not talk about Israel directly. Where I live as a setting, by using Hebrew first names instead of European first names, this is a way, a subtle way to celebrate what's important to me. And again, it goes back to a writer's responsibility. If in my case, I have the merit to live in the highest, for me and for my people, place, then I should be celebrating it and not talking about other things. But this is an evolution, a personal evolution. Just like I don't write about children so much now as I do grandchildren. And I don't write about, falling in love as I did before I had children. Things change. What's valuable changes.
That's right. And I think nuanced writing is something that has a longer life than the one which is purely written for entertainment, as is happening in today's world. So I have seen a lot of, poets, they're getting a lot of fame through these channels, either through their Instagram handle or through other platforms they have got to connect with the audience. They're good, but somehow in the race to be famous, I think depth is something that is missing in the work.
I've had friends who have self-published, which for cookbook is good, a fundraiser for school is good, for a family album with stories of the many generations is good. But other than that, self-publishing means that the life of the writing will evaporate faster than water on a hot day. The essay collection I'm working on now, which is the third volume of a series of essays, is incorporating some research I did 30 years ago. And it said, like in journalism, there are evergreen topics. If someone writes about something that's meaningful to people, it's still going to be meaningful to people. People still love, people still cheat, people still have birth, people still die. People still appreciate the rain, especially in those hot summer days. People appreciate the sun, which helps with the flowers. People appreciate the animals that are part of creation. All of these are evergreen topics. I don't focus so much in my writing, in my visual art, yes, on the animals and the flowers, but I do look at the layers of human relationships, and those topics will be fresh forever, because as my kids who are now grown laugh at me and go, "Mom, I get it now. I understood what you were saying when we were little." And I should have listened to you, which you don't hear as often. But that's okay. They need their self-esteem too.
They are immortal.
They think they are when they're young, yeah.
Because they're the connection which we have as humans with all kinds of things around us will stay forever and will pass from generation to generation rather than just, be at that moment.
I understand in this fast environment, that's what I said before the connection broke, that, people want fast food, they want fast money, they want everything fast, instant gratification, as opposed to working on themselves and getting what comes to them. I think part of my writing is embracing serendipity. What happens, happens, and events that come together as constellations are part of life over which human beings, in my belief, have no control. I believe that as people, we're charged to do the best, to do morally the best with everything that we experience. I had a disagreement with a neighbor very recently, and I don't have any regret for standing for my position, but I regret that I was angry when I spoke to her. Next time I have a difference with a person, I need to work on leaving the situation until I'm not angry. But that's an example of self-growth. And so I have a note here on my desk that I need to write her an apology and do more, not to take back my position. My position was correct, but to take back the way I presented the position. I just
Exactly.
going back to the fast writing, the fast fame. So these friends said, no, we want to self-publish, and they self-published, and then it dropped out. And one friend had such a beautiful story, a story about her life, and she'd gone through many trials and tribulations, the results of which would be very interesting to readers. But she was so fast to want to get the published that she paid someone to have her book published. I've had so many students over the decades who have said, Dr. Greenberg, hey, I want to do this now, I want to do that now. And I said, I'm promising you none of that. The most important part of writing is rewriting. And I might rewrite a manuscript, I'm not even talking flash fiction or brief poem, 10, 20 times. I'm not a perfectionist. I'm not masochistic, but I know that when we initially lay out words, like we're making a soup, that's my favorite analogy. You put the ingredients, but as the soup simmers, you keep tasting to make sure there's the right balance. And writing is like that. It should look effortless, just like acrobats in a circus. It should look like there's no effort. The best writing is seamless, is beautiful. You could wrap it around your neck and be comforted by it. But for writing to be seamless, it means the writer was working very hard on taking all the layers of roughness off. And that's an effort. And I'm sad to say, I don't know
And
if
I
this
think
is really
that's
our journey.
the story becomes great when you write, rewrite, and run it through different rounds of editing yourself. Yeah.
Absolutely. I prefer to work with publishers who have patience for me, for needing to rewrite, even after things have gone to the galley proof stage. I've had publishers who were of the fast society mentality, like some of my students, and they're like, you should be happy, we're going to publish your book. I'm like, no, my writing is my name, it's my brand. And if it's not done correctly, I don't want it. I have walked away from publishing deals. I have had arguments over the decades with publishers. And per my students, it's interesting. The students who are willing to make their ego smaller and to learn how to rewrite and to edit and to receive feedback were the students who went on and published, some of them very regularly. The students who were not yet developed internally enough, who wanted to be a star yesterday, were the students who either dropped out of courses, who paid, again, people paying to have their work published, which is crazy. And at the end of the day, there's really nothing to prove. I think a writer, like a musician, I have friends who are like musicians and orchestras and such high level musicians, or like a painter, anyone else in the expressive domains and the arts, it's called, I guess, really has to have a deep inner reason for putting themselves out in that way. Most of these kinds of work pay very little money, even the highest professionals. Oh, sure, they're your rock stars, the 5 or 10 or 30 or whatever. And say the Bollywood actors, and we can go through every type of art and give examples, but
It
that's the
reminds me
minority.
one famous dialogue from a movie, which was based on the art of dancing. And there is a famous dialogue in that movie that dance to express, not to impress. So the same analogy can be used in the writing, write to express, not to impress.
Absolutely. I find when I teach people that when you get beyond the I want to be a star now, or I want to be rich now, or whatever other balderdash, I love that English, British word, that they're afraid. They're afraid. Just like when people wear flashy clothing as opposed to fancy clothing for a formal event, but flashy clothing, it's to distract, it's a diversion, it's to keep people from looking at what's truth, what's real. And I've heard it said of the arts that it can be very painful to look inside oneself and to discover what's there and what's not there. I don't mean tragic events, I don't mean crises, but to discover, gee, I'm afraid of being with people, or gee, you know, I don't want someone to say they don't like my work, and the growing up that occurs in the process of creating is being able to sit with oneself in peace.
Right.
It's universal. These ideas are not part of one part of the world or one culture. I think all people want to be at peace with themselves. And I think most people, at least the ones who are mentally well, which is most people, want to be at peace with other people too.
That's right. That's right.
So
So,
writing,
carry on. Finish your thought.
writing can be a bridge, but it could be a bridge to oneself, and it could be a bridge to larger society. That's all. Sorry, I used to lecture for 3 hours at a time in
I
university.
think,
This
but
interview
these
we
are the
can go
best
on and
thoughts
on.
that everyone wants to hear. The problem in today's world, specifically with authors who are first timers or are very good in writing, but their doubts and apprehensions around the publishing landscape, not only in India or in Israel or in any other country, but I think globally, publishers are challenged, markets have squeezed for some, whereas for others, they are, selling millions of copies. And so, the newcomers see this world through the bestsellers they see on a lot of stores or Amazon or any other e-commerce platform. So what would be your sort of message to people who are willing to jump into the space or are very good writers and they should write and spend time, in perfecting their art or telling good stories, writing good poems, or any other stuff they wish to?
Turns to each writer really coming to understand their purpose in writing. I know I've said this before, but if a person can be honest with themselves, I, for instance, I'm fine with writing, fine with editing, fine with rewriting literally a dozen or so times for each bit, and then doing it all over again when I'm at galley proofs for my publishers at book stage. But I hate publicizing. So at the moment, I'm in the middle of interviewing people to be a publicist, because this is not something I know how to do it. I'm a rhetorician, but it's not something I enjoy as much as I enjoy creating and finessing the creation. If somebody really wants money, there are certain styles of writing or fame that often they're the same, but they're not always the same. There are certain styles of writing that are more readily purchased. Romance novels, for instance, are very popular fare. Poetry sells terribly. I remember the first time I got a contract offer for a short story collection was after a poetry collection was published. Oh, this was a long time ago. And the publisher said to me, honey, if you can sell a poetry collection than short stories, which are much easier to sell, I'll give you a contract. I'm like, oh, yeah, that works for me. She had published some individual pieces in one of her magazines. But I think a person needs to know what their aim is. For instance, if someone wants to be an electrical engineer, it's very different than if someone wants to be an electrician. They're both good jobs. They both will bring home a salary, but an electrician has a different training and a different focus, a different aim than an engineer. If someone wants to be a popular author, also genre fiction. I write a lot of speculative fiction when I write fiction, and that's genre fiction. That's not going to sell as well as a Weltanschauung, like Hermann Hesse used to write. It's not about Weltanschauung, sorry, Bildungsroman, a story about someone's life. Hesse from Europe was a very big writer of these things. I love his work. They're very existential. It was fun as a teenager. I got a kick from it. But that's not going to sell in the same way that a bodice ripper will sell or mystery will sell. I think the popular subgenres now are speculative fiction, which includes fantasy and science fiction and horror. I hate when I'm given a manuscript of horror by a magazine to comment on. I don't like horror. But some people do. It sells well. Romance is very popular, and mystery is very popular. Decades ago, Westerns were very popular. They're not as popular now. And it's like anything else. If a piece of writing is a product, it really takes market sense, what's going on in the shuk in the market, to look. People are always advised, you either write for yourself or for an audience or for like a profit goal. If you're writing for an audience, then look and see what's been published by that publisher or by that magazine. If you're writing for yourself, it doesn't matter. If you're writing for a profit goal, look what types of things are selling. I mean, it just takes a little research. And then when your piece is ready, boldface, italics, when it's ready, just so many students have sent things out, and I said, don't send them out yet. And they got rejected. And other students who waited and polished and polished and polished, they got published and then published again because they had the skill of finessing it, refining.